And then what I'll try to do today is we have a pretty straightforward time, which is about an hour. So I'll try to cover some of the new features that we have in the tool, but also probably some of the features that you might not know that's in here. Everything from loading data to drawing custom boundaries to using the search feature for data and such. So we hit some of the major stuff, but if we go through some parts that you want to know more in particular, just stop me and let me know. It's an open session for us, but what I'll try to do is hit some of the big things that you can do within the tool.
Great.
Cool. All right, so let's talk about the basics, which is the map page itself. Within the tool, now one of the things with PolicyMap, which I probably should have taken this here first, is that we have a lot of data. So if you are sometimes overwhelmed with how much data is in the tool, there's two really cool resources you can use to kind of see what's in PolicyMap. And I'll send you this link, but this is basically a summary of all the different indicators of data that we have in PolicyMap, and it's broken up by the categories that are in the tool. So that way, if you just want to get a broad picture and see what's in maybe economy, it'll tell you that we have jobs data in economy, we have it by metro, by local, we have small business, and so forth. So it's just trying to give you kind of a broad picture of what's in that category of data. It's going to give you what years are available, and then the other, probably a more important thing for some of your users, whoops, thanks a lot, clever guy, is that it's also going to show you what is available at the different geographies, because a lot of times you probably are working in different areas and need data for different levels of geography. So this is going to give you that idea that you can find, in this case, jobs data at the block group level, but also at the track, at the county, and so forth as you go higher in geography. So it's a great place to start. I usually take all of our users here just because there's so much data and you can get really lost within the tool itself. With that said, we did add a very new feature, and it's a bit of a beta for us because as with all kind of searching algorithms, you need users to add data and input to it. And so the data tab in the very top here allows you to do actually searching for data by keywords. So instead of going through that list of all the different categories of data and kind of figuring out what's in there, you can go to this tab here and just basically start typing in a handful of keywords. So if you want to look at new markets data or something, it'll find any variable that's in PolicyMap that contains those keywords, new markets. So that way, this is the new markets criteria from the CDFI fund. If you're looking for CRA eligibility, you can type in CRA. It'll find those variables. And of course, if you're looking for just very simple stuff like income or poverty data, it'll show you all the variables related to that. So hopefully this will give you a much, probably a much better way to get to data without having to dig through all the categories. But I always suggest that first page only because there is a lot of data, and sometimes some keywords might not be in the top of your mind when you're looking for data.
Excuse me, so can you just zoom in just a little bit on your screen? It looks really small.
Oh yeah, sure. You know what? Let me do something real quick then. I'm gonna switch screens. And we'll see. A little better?
Yeah. Can anybody else see? No, maybe
we're in a big room, so.
We're in a big room.
Maybe if you zoom the browser in a little bit.
I can't. It'll distort things, but that's fine. We can do that.
That's better. Yeah.
All right. So this bar in the very top here, you can toggle between location, which we'll come back to, but data is the ability to enter keywords in here, and it will try to find any indicators that are related to those variables. So income, poverty data. You can do health indicators, and of course, any federal programs. All right, let's get back to 100%. There we go. So that's probably the biggest and newest feature within the tool with PolicyMap. What it's going to try to do is give you access to data that you don't have to dig through all the different features and categories in there. So hopefully you'll be able to use that right off the bat. But the tool itself is still PolicyMap. We are an online data mapping tool, so our goal is to give you the ability to visualize data. So the map itself is interactive. You can click and drag around. You can zoom in and out using the zoom bar on the right. You can scroll with your mouse wheel. It's all pretty basic stuff. The location bar by default without the data tab is the ability for you to zoom into a place. So think of it like a Google Maps. You can type in an address. Of course, I can't type in my own address. But it'll drop a pin on that address. It'll show you the location, and then you have the same ability to basically pan to a different part of the neighborhood or zoom in and out to kind of get a broader or closer picture of a given area. The location bar is a bit of an open text box as well, just like the search feature for data. It's also a search feature for geographies, meaning that you can type in a zip code, a city, a county, a neighborhood, and so forth, and it will, again, try to identify those places. So I put in, my typing skills this morning are really bad. So I type in Philadelphia or my name, you'll see that it'll list every place in the country that has the first 4 letters, and it'll actually list it by population size. But if you do search for geography, it'll zoom there just like the point, but instead it'll draw the geographic boundary for it, giving you an idea of that area. You can click onto the map at any time. And what this will do is it'll draw, I know you can't see the bubble, but what it'll do is it'll draw the smallest geography that's in our universe, and then it'll show you all the different geographies at that point that it clicked sits in. So in this case, this point on the edge of this boundary here sits within this block group, which sits within the tract, the zip code, the county, the metro, and so forth as you go higher and higher. So at the very least, that should be a tool that you can use just to identify the census geography that a place might sit in. There's a couple other ways to get around that as well. So once you have data on the map, the next step really is the ability to add data, and that's the categories that you see up here, but also that search function that we have up here. The My Data tab is a pretty unique one in that it ties with the ability to load data, which we'll come to in a moment, but also the ability for you to access any data that we process for you. And I think we've done a few, maybe a handful here and there, but also other data sets that users have shared with you as well. So My Data is basically any data that is just related to your account or your group. And then the rest of these are just categories that hopefully have data that contains or categories that have data that kind of fits the category itself. So demographics is just some basic demographic variables. But in here, you'll see some that we created ourselves, which is the diversity index, which is a really neat variable. So you have the basic stuff like population and density and race and such, as well as age. Diversity is what we did in taking the racial characteristics from the census, and instead of showing one race at a time, let me just clean the map up a bit. Instead of showing one race at a time, we displayed all of the races on the map, but showed them by predominant or ethnic groups in those areas. So in this case, anything in the red is predominantly Hispanic, anything in the black or in the blue is predominantly black, and then the greens are white, and so forth as you go different colors. So depending on the neighborhoods that you're in, you can see some really neat diversity or sometimes segregation in these areas. And then the different colors themselves really just represent how dense or how predominant that race is in that particular area. And so while you have places that are over 90% in that particular race or ethnicities, you have these other places that are actually very mixed in that while Hispanics is the predominant race in this particular area, they do represent not the majority in the area as a whole. So some of these layers are very unique in demographics as well as in diversity. So there's another one where we do index. There are other variables in here, including language spoken at home, foreign-born, and immigration. Probably a very unique category for our tool itself that we just started adding more variables to is the health indicators. When we first started with health, we really only had a handful of indicators really from the CDT. And as health became a much more measured variable for neighborhoods, more and more agencies started producing data, including the census, with the ACS started surveying who has health insurance. And so with this, you have the ACS numbers for total population with or without health insurance, broken up by race, by age, by income, by employment coverage or not, and then even type of insurance. And so it is the ACS, so this brings it down to the block group level. I believe this might be tracked, but it is a smaller geography to look at. Some other variables in the health category are from the CDC in conjunction with the census, creating a survey called the BRFSIS data, the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance Survey. So with that, it does have some really neat variables related to things like chronic conditions, health status. There's risk factors themselves like obesity, physically active, consumption of alcohol and such. We hope that there's an update to this, and if there is, it'll be more expansive in the categories and data that's available. But the first cut of BRFSIS is actually a really neat piece of data that talks about some of the basics of risk factors. And then just another category I'll cover, and the rest I hope if you want to explore on your own a little bit, this will give you a chance to kind of see what's in here. But federal guidelines is many of the different federal programs that we participate in as a CDFI ourselves. So with that includes the New Markets Program from the CDFI Fund, including all of the secondary and other distress indicators for that. So things like hub zones, medically underserved, ARC regions, and such. Continuing with CDFI, there is the investment areas that are available. Again, all of the supporting criteria for that program. But other federal programs from HUD, which includes recap data, qualified census tracts, CRA, and then hub zones and SBA. All right, is there any categories of data you want me to cover, or does that give you a good sense of what you can find from these categories?
Can you look at the analytics tab?
Sure. So this is mainly any data that we produce ourselves. So that's a kind of a good segue into the data in PolicyMap, is that almost all the data in PolicyMap is from the source. We do not do any type of normalizing or reprocessing data. All we actually do is take the data and make sure it fits to a geography and put it into PolicyMap. The analytics is the only time that we produce data based on some of those other variables. So things like LSAs is a program that our parent company does that is kind of in conjunction with the USDA food desert data, but in this case, this is limited access to a grocery store that has fresh food. There's MBA programs, and then there's calculations for HMDA, as well as distance to a high-performing school and transit.
Could you click on the distance to high-performing school and just show us the math on that?
Sure. So it's at a track level, and it's by centroids of tracks. And what you can do is, so the lighter the color means the shorter the distance, and the darker color means the further away. So this is saying that this track is 3 miles away from a high-performing public school.
And the dark purple is Camden, across from Philadelphia?
That's right, yep. And then what you can do is we use the grade schools data. They do have a ranking system, so it's under education for any education data, and then the school performance data is right here. So what you can do is display all the schools at once. We're going to jump a little ahead on data here, but in this case, this is point data set, which is all the great schools school data, and then the layer for distance to high performing schools. And then what you can do with the point data set is that you can filter based on those categories, which is the school ranking. So if you want to show where all the high performing schools are, that's a little jump there. You can sort of see, and we'll find out why that one is there, but you can sort of see why all these areas that are far away from high performing school. You can actually even color code all the schools at once. We're jumping ahead, but in this case, you can start seeing where there are clusters of schools that are high performing versus not. So it's a little more lost in these points a bit with so many underperforming schools. I'll wait until that passes.
Yeah, sorry, we're right on browser.
So let me add, I kind of showed you, well, let's jump back to point data sets. I can show you how that works. Point data sets are really neat. I'll just do a different one just so you can kind of see with more variables. So with point data sets, it's basically just icons that represent the address for that particular data. So the last one I showed you was this pretty much public school data, but with grades from grade schools that had test scores and such for each school. Grade schools only has a handful of variables. So I want to show you the public school data set from the National Center for Educational Statistics, because it has more variables to choose from, and those variables make a pretty big impact when it comes to being able to filter or show just the type of schools, or in this case, that you want to show in the map. So you can click on any school, and it'll give you as much information that's possible from the NCES. So everything from the grades that it offers, the total number of students, student-teacher ratio, enrollment information, demographics, and such. So with points, what we wanted to do is turn some of this information into the ability for a user to kind of just show exactly the type of schools that are on the map. And the filters are those types of filters themselves. So with this, you can filter by type of schools, the status that it is, the level that it covers, the individual grades. And if you keep going down, it gets even further into the data. So is it a charter school? Is it a magnet school? It even talks about the demographics of the schools. So on a simple level, you can say, I just want to show middle schools on the map, and the map will clean up and just show middle schools. The neat thing with filters is that you can combine filters. So that way you can say, show me middle schools and high schools. And you can even combine filters from other categories. So you can say, show me high schools and middle schools, but also have fewer than 250 students. So the more filters you add, the more or less schools it's going to add to the map. And basically what it's trying to do is whittle all the points that are being shown in the map to just the ones that you're trying to identify in those categories. And that's for pretty much any point data set within the tool. You can filter multiple filters, or you can color code one category of filter. Data layers are a little bit different. So we sort of jumped ahead a bit, but there are two types of data that you can use within PolicyMap. And they're really simple because they're broken up into these columns with every category of data. The first two columns are what we call a data layer. And all that is just the aggregate data. It's those colorful maps you're probably familiar with within PolicyMap. Data layers have no address level data. It's all aggregated to different geographies. And then the point data set, which is columns 3 and 4, those are the address ones, the ones that I showed you with schools and such. So you saw that points have a legend that you can customize and filter and color code and such. Data layers have a legend as well with a lot more functionality when it comes to the layer. So the first thing you want to use with the legend for a data layer is that it's going to give you the ability to view the map a little bit. Things like what geography is being shown in the map. So this is saying that anything that's being shown is shaded at the census tract level. The year after the track is not the year of the data, it's actually the year of the boundary that the data is associated to, because every 10 years, the census updates the boundaries themselves with the biennial census. So there's a 2000 census boundary, and there's a 2010, and there'll be a 2020, and so forth. And then the values are based on the ranges that are here. So anything in a dark purple is a tract that has a median household income of 76,000 or more. And then the other side of that spectrum is 34,000 or less. You can click onto any geography, and again, it'll draw the boundary that you're currently zoomed at and give you the value for that particular geography. So in this case, it's saying this tract has a median household income of 88,000, and then it sits within a zip code of 113 and the county subdivision of 118 and so forth as you go higher and higher. And then right across the street in the Philadelphia counties, then the income is much different. So that's kind of the start of how to use the legend. It'll tell you how to read it, But the legend is also going to give you the ability to customize the data a little bit. So you can do things like changing the year. And that way you can go back in time and look at income in 2000. And so you'll see that the shade by changes from census tract 2010 to 2000 because the aggregation at that time was done at the 2000 boundaries. The variable is pretty unique within PolicyMap. It basically changes how the data is being shown. So in the case of income, there's only a handful of variables, but if you use any of the other indicators that are in the tool, you might have many more to choose from. So by default, the variable for income is dollar amount because you want to see income as dollars. But in this case, you can also see the income change between the two different years that we have within PolicyMap. You can see a 15-year change from 2000 to the 2015 ACS, or a 5-year change between the 2010 and the 2015 ACS. So what you get here is that the title changes from just median household income to the percent change in household income. And then the legend itself changes from dollar amounts to percentages. And then it's saying that anything in a dark purple is a tract that has an increase of 18% or more. In this case, this tract has 80%, whereas the other side of that spectrum has a decrease of 9.5% or more. And so in this case, it's 36%. And then the last part of the legend that's pretty unique is that the colors themselves, the ranges that are being created, they're quintiles. They're basically just created by taking the total number of geographies and evenly dividing them into fifths. In this case, it's tracts and dividing the tract into fifths, and that's how the ranges themselves are created. But we do give users the ability to make your own cut point. So maybe if your goal is to try to identify places that have an X amount of increase in income, but also identify those places that have an X amount of income that was decreased, then you can click onto the edit function and it'll release the field, allowing you to manually enter your numbers yourself. So maybe your goal is to try to find places that have over 100% increase in household income, but then we'll find the ranges in between. And so with a few edits, you can see now the map will only show me places that have an income increase of over 100% in the dark purple, and also places that have a decrease of over 50% in the orangish, the darker orange colors, and then everything in between. So the ability to edit range is pretty unique and also pretty powerful because it allows you to control the data that's being displayed on the map. So it's not just percentages, it's also number, it's count, it's just dollars itself. So if you want to show a map that has places that have specific income ranges or poverty rates, you can control the map by editing the ranges in that process. All right. And then you can change the colors, some other things here and there. But other than that, just the only thing I can point out with the legend is take a moment, if you do load any data point or data layers, just take a look at the legend, make sure that it's set up the way you want it to be displayed, because you do have some customization for those layers in those data sets. All right. So let me show you one last part with the map, which is the ability to export maps. And then we'll talk about how you can make custom regions and download data and such. But hopefully that gives you a general sense of using the data and how to customize the data a little bit. So let's add Philadelphia. All right, so now you made a map. It's pretty or sometimes really colorful and cluttered, but you want to be able to use this map somewhere else, be it either in a Word document or PowerPoint, or just email it as an attachment to the user. That's all done within these tabs in the top right-hand corner. The one that I'll show you the most, that's probably important, is the save one, only because it allows you to save this instance of this map, so you can come back to it anytime you want to. A year from now, 3 months from now, 5 years from now, this map will be saved in your account, allowing you to recreate the map without having to do the whole process again. We're going to add a pretty cool function, probably about a month or so, which is the ability to make a project folder. And that way, anything you build within your PolicyMap account, be it maps, tables, reports, custom regions, data layers, you can just throw into a project folder and then come back to it again. But if you want to take this map offline, you're going to use the print function. And what this will do is open up a very simple dialog box. The window itself is fully interactive, meaning you can click and drag the map around. You can zoom in and out to get as close or however you want the map to be situated. On the left is a lot of options to customize the map a little bit. You can increase the font of the text. You can change the orientation of your export. So Philadelphia as a whole is a pretty vertical place. I can change it to make it fit that way. The file format is just how you want to use it outside of PolicyMap. If you just want to attach it to an email or print something out, the PDF is pretty basic for that process. But if you wanted to copy and paste it into a Word document or a PowerPoint, do a little more customization with the map. The PNG is basically just a digital file like a photo, allowing you to crop it and scale it to make it larger and smaller and such. You can add text to the title. You can remove text itself. You can also make a clean map with nothing on it, allowing you to just add your own context in your description as you're presenting it. And then more options allows you to add things like more text if you wanted to. So this is the description of the entire data set. And then probably one of my favorite features is the cut out selected locations, sometimes called island printing if you use spatial tools. But what this does is it'll cut out the area that you're working in and only shade in that particular area. So it allows your geography, the places you're presenting, to stand out a little further. So you can see the difference between the two. And then when you export, it'll basically cut everything out and it'll give you a file. It'll download right onto your desktop. And it does not save anything within your tool. So again, if you do want to save something, use the save function. Some other easy ones that you can share with other users. If you want to share this map with somebody else, you can click the share function itself. And this would give you a couple of options. The first is a link that you can either embed into an email or into a website and such. You can email that link directly to a person. And then, of course, you can even embed an interactive map onto a website or tool. So if you've seen any of our blogs that we write, this is what we use to do that. And then, of course, we even have social media because there's some cool maps you can share once in a while. All right, so that's the basic share functions. Hopefully my download will come to me in a moment, but in that process, let me know if there's any questions about that so far. Cool, all right, there it is. So here's my file. As you can see, it cuts out everything around it. It makes even the points. So it makes, in my case, Philadelphia stand out, and where all the details that I need for the data is available up here. So that way I don't have to memorize it and I can just basically show the data itself.
And so you can do that for a census tract, a zip code, a neighborhood, create your own boundaries, right? It's not just by a city. You can choose whatever you want, yeah.
That's right, yeah. So if you make, which we're going to cover right now, a custom region, you can have just your custom region stand out and colored in as well. Yep, that's exactly right. All right, so that's perfect. So that segues into our next part, which is the ability to make your own boundaries. So everything that I've shown you so far is basically what we call predefined geographies within PolicyMap. And there are some really cool predefined geographies. If you needed to get to more complex ones, you can click onto the location bar and you can get to things like congressional districts, school districts, and just simple tracts and block groups. You can overlay those boundaries as well on the bottom where it says map boundaries. And this allows you to overlay any of the boundaries that we have in PolicyMap, again, tracts, congressional districts, and such. So that way you can see what those boundaries look like on a map. And you combine multiple boundaries at the same time to see how they are contained within themselves. We have some pretty unique ones as well. I don't know how Memphis leaked into my account, but you can have it in here. And then we have watershed data, and then we actually will have flood zones in here probably in about a month or so as well. So you can display all those boundaries. But those are all predefined boundaries. Those are boundaries that exist within our universe. So we want to give users the ability to make their own boundaries, and that's the create button on the bottom. We call them custom regions in PolicyMap, and there's 3 unique ways to make a custom region. The first is the draw feature. It's a really simple one. When you follow through the steps, all it's saying in that window is saying you can just click onto the map, and you're dropping the vertices. You can't see it, so you can actually zoom in further and further until you get down to the street level if you need to. And really all you're doing is dropping the vertices of a target area and clicking onto the first point or a point, and it'll close that custom region. And then you want to just give it a very simple name. So a drawn custom region is unique in that it doesn't care about any of the underlying boundaries that are in PolicyMap. You can cross city lines, county lines, track zip codes, and so forth. It will care when you are downloading data or maybe getting a report for it. It'll determine the geography that it's going to use to aggregate and use a very simple 50% rule. So that way, if it's going to use tracks, it'll figure out as long as a track contains 50% of its area within that custom region, it'll use it within the aggregation. But if you do have a boundary that does contain predefined geographies like tracks or zip codes and such, then you'll use the second function, which is the assemble custom region. And this allows you to basically use any of the geographies that are in PolicyMap. So by default, it's going to try to use the geography you're zoomed into. In this case, it's tracks. But this menu up here allows you to use any of the other boundaries that are in our tool, things like block groups, zip codes, counties, metros, congressional districts.
Sorry,
And
so
assembling is really simple. Sure.
Well, I'll let you finish this thought, and then I'm going to go back to a question about the logic behind calculating custom drawn maps.
Sure, perfect. So assembling a custom region is really simple. It's just a matter of clicking onto the map. If you make a mistake, you can deselect places. And then the last part is that you can make a non-contiguous assemble custom region, allowing you to click onto places that basically don't touch each other. And then when you're done, click save, and it'll give you a chance to save that particular custom region. All right, go ahead. It's a good question I hear.
So, okay, so what you're saying regarding the custom map is that you draw the boundaries, you choose a data set to mine some data from based on the geographies that are used by that data set. If your custom boundary includes at least 50% of the smallest geography up from that data set, it will be aggregated into the calculation for your custom boundary. That's correct. Is that what you're saying? Okay. So if it's not at least 50%, then it doesn't include it at all.
That's correct. Yep. And okay. That is also tied into, let me just pull up tracks so people kind of see how that works. So in this case, pretty much everyone that I drew happens to fall in here. Maybe this one at the most. Nope, see that track sits outside. But yeah, so that's exactly the case. As long as 50% of a track sits within your custom region or block group or any other geographies, it's going to use that. It's going to add it into the aggregation of the data, or it's going to download in the. And it adds
the whole amount of that. It's like 60% of another census tract. It'll add the entire census tract, or will it add a proportion of the census tract? So for example, if we're looking at a population within a custom boundary, right? We want to see the number of people that live within a custom boundary, and along the edges of that custom boundary, there's some census tracts that are 40%, some census tracts that are 60%. Is there any application or proportion for those fringe census tracts, or do you just do, some are zeroed out, some are 100% for those census tracts that are cut in half?
That's right. So the latter part. So if its area isn't more than 50% or more, then it's not included in the aggregation.
Okay.
Sorry, our screen just went blank here, so we're going to get it back up because nobody knows the password. good with that.
Perfect. So it's a good question, and it'll tie us into the downloading function, which I'll show you that's tied to that as well. And then the last function itself is a custom region for custom regions. Any custom regions that you create will be saved into this My Custom Region tab.
Sorry, Phil,
a couple of options.
Can you hold on 1 second?
I don't want to get frozen out.
Our screen locked up because from inactivity on our side, so we can't see your screen right now. So we're trying to log back in, but we are unsure of the conference room password.
I did it wrong. Two different typists to get that.
All right. Now we can see what you're doing again.
I can't tell you who it was.
Perfect. All right. As I was saying, custom regions, once you create them, it'll be in this menu on the left, and allowing you to not only access them, so you can re-add them to the map and remove them as well, but you can also share it with other users. So this allows you to put your custom region into someone else's account, allowing them to use your custom region. And then what you'll see in here is that it'll have the author's name. So whoever created it will be the author of that custom region.
So the custom region, I don't know, do we have enterprise account, or do we just have do we have a limited number of users for our company?
I believe you have a handful of logins. I'll check, but yeah, so that way you'll type in the person's email address.
So when we share custom boundaries or whatever, we have to share individually, or is there a way that we can share just sort of like a public within our network of 5? Do we have to share individually with the 5 users that we have, or whatever number it is?
Yeah, at this time it is individually. When we do the folder function, which is the ability to allow you to make a project, that'll be an enterprise function where you can just make a folder for everyone and just add things into it. All right, and then the last part of custom regions, and it all ties back into the ability to download or get data off of PolicyMap. So everything I've shown you is the ability to see data that's already in PolicyMap, but if you needed to download or take some of this data off and do whatever analysis you wanted to do offline, then there's an option to download data. And the ability to download data is just tied to whatever data you have on the map. So let's say we want to get a list of how about all the home loans that were piggyback loans? I'm going to throw. Of course, I pick a data set that has no data in Philadelphia. All right, let's try a different one. All right, we'll do the estimated number of people with asthma. So all you need to do is have whatever data that's displayed on the map is what it's going to be downloaded. So in this case, I changed from percentage to estimated number because I want to get the number of people, and that's what I'm going to download. But I wanted to download %, then that's what it'll download. So whatever is shown on the legend on the map is what you're going to download into the data. And as I mentioned, there's 2 types of data you can download, points and layers. You can download both types at the same time.
Is
so
that regardless? That's the entire 4 corners of the map, or is it within the boundaries that you've set that you're downloading data?
Sure. So there's. Let me just put a piece of point set on here. The download actually has a couple different functions. So let's jump in there and you can kind of determine it. The first step of downloading is you choose what data you want to download. So we'll start with a very basic, which is layered data. Again, that's the aggregate data for the layer that's being shown. Step 2 is where you get to determine what you're going to download. So that's the question you might have. So you can either download it by the custom regions that we have on the map, or you can download it by a geography, like the nation, a state, a county. We don't have extent at this moment. That'll probably be something that we add in a future function there. Extent basically is what is being shown on the map. But in this case, if I want to get all the tracks in Philadelphia, I can do that as well. In the case of downloading layered data, you get to choose the geography that you're going to download at. So by default, it's going to use that smallest geography, which is tracks. But I can download it, all the county subdivisions or all the cities within a place, or just the one value of the state or the county itself. And then step 3 is a very simple process. It's just explaining exactly what you're trying to download. So in this case, this is the number of people that reported to have asthma in 2013, which is the most recent data set by tracks in Philadelphia. And so this will give you a list, and hopefully it'll generate in time as I babble. It'll give you a list of the FIPS code for every census tract, and then the value, in this case, number of adults that have asthma for that source. So let's do a point 1 while this downloads, because it takes a moment or so. So step 2, we're going to do point data sets. So we're just going to try to download every public school that's in a given area. Again, step 2 is the exact same process. You can either add a predefined geography, or you can just use one of the custom regions that you already have on the map. So I'll just do it just for Fairmont here. And step 3 is a very simple summary sentence of what you're going to download. So this is my list of tracks. So it gives actually 3 columns with the same variables. It's only because if you want to use this data not just as a table in a spreadsheet, but maybe you want to use it into a spatial tool, the formatted FIPS code column allows you to join this basically to a boundary file if you do mapping tools. The reality is you don't need it, and so this will give you every census tract in Philly, and in this case, the total number of adults that have asthma in those tracts, and then the ones that are NAs are just have no data. In the case of points, same thing. This should be much faster, hopefully. But this will basically give you a list of just basically all the schools that are in that custom region that I selected, and then it'll give you all the data for that point data set. So this is the 24 schools that are here, and then these are all the variables that are associated to the schools themselves. So that can be for any geography, not just a custom region, for the state, for the nation. If you want to give a list of every school that way, it'll generate that list. And then the last feature, which is pretty unique, and these 2 data sets make no sense, but we'll work with it. It's the ability for you to download data for points, but assign it or associate it to a geography. So that's the 3rd function, which is points with layers. If you are a CDFI like us, you can basically load your portfolio and download a list. Let me just actually do that. That will make more sense. All right. So let's say I want to find out of my portfolio that I've loaded. These are 100 portfolios that we've had in our tool, and we want to find out of these ones which ones are in tracks that are eligible for CRA new markets. And this is really why we built this last feature here, which is the ability to download points with layers at the same time, because it'll do just that. It'll basically kick me back a list of all my 100 addresses, and of the 100 addresses, which ones sit in eligible tracks or not. And so it's not just CRA, but can be for any variable within PolicyMap. So if you want to find out of your investments, which ones are in areas of high poverty, of lending trends that are piggyback loans, of areas of high crime, and so forth. The 3rd function, downloading points with layers, is just that. So we're going to add a place.
Let me throw this out there. Say we've got 300 assets in our portfolio. We map all those, and we want to cross those to find out which one of those are near a high-performing school, have access to decent food, and something else. We can do that?
Yep, this is what it'll do then. Exactly right.
Okay, great.
So in this case, this is my 100 addresses that I have. I just want to find out of my 100, of the ones that are in Philadelphia County, which ones are in tracks that are eligible for new markets or not. But we can do that as well. So let's say we want to find out of these ones, which ones are in areas close to a high-performing school, and the distance they are to a high-performing school, it'll do the same thing. So
how many layers can you do at a time? The data layer?
One layer. Unfortunately, with the download, it's one at a time. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So if we had to do if we wanted to do the 3-layer analysis that Marilyn was talking about, we would need to do the download 3 different times and then through Excel, you know,
merge them together. Yep.
Yeah, HLOOKUP or whatever to get them all together. Okay.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the benefit, it'll kick you a file for each one of those layers, but the listing of the addresses will be the same. So nothing's changed for the order, and you're just simply merging those 3 together. And then the only difference is the download for points. It doesn't download directly into your account or your desktop, only because it's a pretty complex download. So it is being sent to your individual email addresses or whatever logged in you're at. It's only because of the complexity of this, we found out that it takes sometimes longer than usual. And so it could take a minute to 5 minutes for that file to be generated. So it'll get emailed to you. In that process, I'm going to wait till that file comes, but I'll show you how to upload a file then. And that should be the last part of our session. That'll give you an idea of how easy it is to upload a point data set. But before I jump in there, is there any other questions in the map that I can try to answer for you? Okay. Okay. So the data loader really is probably the easiest part to show, only because it's a very, very simple tool. I actually call it a dummy data loader, in that it doesn't look at any data that you upload. All it wants to do is geocode a list of addresses in a spreadsheet that you might have. So all you really need is to have a spreadsheet. There's only 3 variables or a handful of variables that are needed or required for every file, and that's the address, city, state, and zip, or combination of address, zip, address, city, state. If you have latitudes and longitudes already, you can add those into the file as columns, and we'll use your coordinates over our geocoder. But otherwise, everything else that you see here, customer name, fiscal year, closing dates, these are all our data. It's all dynamic. So it means that you can add your own data in here as well for each address, or you can have nothing at all and just have the address, city, state. That way you can hide the privacy of the data that you're trying to upload.
95% of this for our portfolio. There were addresses that were kick-outs, but we have most of this as of maybe the end of last year.
It's already uploaded on yours, isn't it?
And the
Yeah,
data,
it's already here. You can start using the download function right now. Then
the data points are just addresses, or are there data tags attached to them?
You can put whatever you want. So we could have a map of the United States on our website where you cover over a point that would say this is 50 units affordable at this, you know, that we acquired in 2011. We can put on it whatever we want for our. I had some trouble getting correct addresses for some things because what asset management has and got kicked out. But we have a lot of it. So I think if we could keep this data loading, we'd know a lot about our portfolio.
So one of the cool things about the dummy data loader is that we're going to add a little bit of intelligence to it. But again, it's after a bit of an update to what we're doing with our infrastructure. So maybe about a few months more. So at this moment, it does not look at any of the underlying categories. It doesn't give you the filters that you saw with the schools, where we can filter middle schools and high schools. Again, all it wants to do is geocode points. Now the difference is, because it's a dummy and pretty straightforward data loader, you can make your own categories and upload those individually and then display them all at once. But you can basically make multiple data sets and upload them individually. So let me show you how to upload it. Again, it's probably the easiest process in our tool. Choose how you want to upload. In this case, we're going to use a spreadsheet. Give it a very simple name. Choose how you want to share it. So this is another one of these very unique features. By default, I always suggest using myself only, meaning that only your account will be able to access this particular data set, so no one else can see it. If you wanted to share with other people, you can actually share it either with the general public, which means anyone that comes to PolicyMap will be able to see it. We're actually even going to hide that data. So this is going to be a little bit different in about a month or so as well. But this actually gives some of our users the ability to share their data sets they upload with users through a couple different features, things like the embed map, the ability to email a data set to someone, or anyone can access it. And then the other more simple share is the ability to identify people that you want to share individually. So again, the folder function allows you to put this data set into a domain or a group instead of just one person at a time. The icons are simple. These are just the ones that are in PolicyMap. We're going to add more as well. And then, of course, other colors in the tool. And then just choose your file that you want to upload. And that's really it. So all this can be edited at any time. You can come back to this, change the name, change how you want to share it, and change the icon. You'll see this first page once. All this page is wanting to do is identify those 4 fields that I talked about, which is the address, city, state, and zip. If for whatever reason one of these fields is not listed up here and it's probably listed down here, you can just select it and say, gosh, this should have been city or this should have been state. And then the other thing that it tries to identify is any columns that are numerical only will give you an option to say, is that numerical column represented as a dollar amount or percentage, or just the number itself. And that's really how easy it should take. This is a web-based tool. For 100 addresses, it took maybe probably less than a second. Our limit to the files themselves, the data loader is very unique in that it is an unlimited data loader, but the limit is by file, only because of how much a web-based tool can handle. So each file, let me go back to my file here, can have up to 10,000 addresses in it. So that's 10,000 rows, and then 45 columns of data. And then each field can have up to 250 characters. So a file can have a ton of data. You probably won't always go to 10,000. It sometimes makes more sense to split it up. But if you do, a 10,000 file geocode might take 2 or 3 minutes instead of half a second. So it's exponentially based on the amount of data. But once you get to this page here, you're pretty much done. What it did here was just recreate my spreadsheet, but on the web. And then it gives me a match rate saying that of the 100 addresses, 98 were found, telling me that I can click into the fields here to edit. And I can also resort these columns here. The first column is probably the most important one. It's telling you that anything in a green was able to be found in our geocoder, and then the red was the ones that failed. And that way you can group together the ones that failed. And there's a couple of ways you can fix this. You can, in this case, type in the address here directly. If you do have a large amount that just isn't being able to be found in our geocoder, you can do what some of our users do and what actually our GIS team does, which is hand geocoding. It's the glamorous world of going to Google Maps with your failed addresses and finding out the lat-longs for those files. Pretty much every GIS person has to encounter that horrific process. All right, before we go any further, let me just jump to this real quick since my file took that long to process. But so in this case, this is a list of every one of my addresses that I uploaded, and then letting me know of the addresses which ones were eligible for new markets and which ones were not. So it just kicks back my entire file that I uploaded. But other than that, once you save it, you can basically do that same process that I did. So I can take this file now, go to the maps page, add a data layer that I want to get data for the addresses, and then download that in that process.